There's nothing like the real feel of stepping into a classic arcade. It's one thing to play a throwback of choice on old school hardware, but it hits quite differently walking into the mall in the mid-90s or stumbling upon a local pub or barcade present day. I've had the privilege to play through many of these cult classics with some amazing colleagues, yet one marvel in particular I've never seen in person is none other than one of Konami's earliest grails. I don't know how an 8-year-old cat would have reacted if he did. I think my brain would spontaneously erupt witnessing Simon Belmont towering before me in all his arcade glory. Regardless of my fate, Haunted Castle was Konami's crack at an Arcadevania. Well, sorta. Haunted Castle wasn't originally intended to follow alongside the Castlevania mythos. Shockingly, Konami had another horror-esque property in the pipeline that unfortunately just couldn't seem to get itself off the ground. Eventually coming to terms with these shortcomings, Konami pivoted to stop the bleeding, repackaging their new endeavor with some familiar brand recognition they knew could save face. The final product would go on to become the notorious arcade release of Haunted Castle. This blood-sucking, yet realistically, quarter sucker is a retelling of Simon's tales across the NES. At least from the promotional art, that's what they wanted one to assume. However, although repackaged in its likeliness, it doesn't take away from the game's validity. Hell, let's not act like Mario 2 wasn't a thing, and Doki Doki Panic wasn't the codename to get access to all the basement-dwelling parties. Many of our favorite Konami classics got their start on the arcade scene. Castlevania was already established as a household name here on the home market turf, so putting that into perspective as we move forward should help us better critique this little oddity when tensions rise, and trust me, they will. This vampiric thriller opens to fan favorite Simon Belmont on his big wedding day no less, alongside his beautiful bride-to-be, Selena. Hey, regardless of canon, let the man have his day, alright? Dude has been through some shit. Unfortunately, Simon can't have nice things as the skies darken and a storm rolls in to rain on his parade. As so, the fearsome but oh-so-trolly Vlad Tepes just so happens to return once more to make a real geek out of poor Simon, swooping down upon the village chapel and taking his lovely bride like the true salty cockblocker he is. Side note here on Miss Selena, she wasn't the only fair maiden that caught our boy Simon's eye. Are we not going to talk about the many stories we heard throughout Simon's quest, or are we going to just chalk that one up to mistranslation too? I'll give this playboy a pass for now, yet we also can't forget about Miss Linda Entwistle. Linda who? You know, Linda from the Worlds of Power series, his first main squeeze he would go on to rescue during his first trip to Castlevania. She was a keeper, Simon. What happened, bro? Well, enough said, we can't change the past, for we can only now look to the future. With larger detailed sprite work comes bigger and badder weapons. Where your muscle memory finds you innately seeking out candles for a fresh restock, in Haunted Castle, hearts, arms, and sub-weapons are recovered through battle. You embark on this quest with your vintage leather whip. Putting boots to asses and fists to cuffs upon traversing the lands will be essential for key upgrades. Obtaining the Morningstar is vital as it grants you greater range while dealing double damage. New to the series is Simon's trusty broadsword, possibly wielded at a time by his role model Conan, tripling your base attack and netting you a speedy victory. Simon's new weapons bring some much needed flavor to this adventure. The bomb can now be launched on command, imploding on impact to clear out a horde of approaching night creatures. The torch can be tossed to cover nearby terrain, engulfing the land in a fiery trail, torching your enemies like a pool of holy water. The boomerang has a significant deal of range, clearing the path ahead for easier travel. It's essentially the equivalency of the cross, yet funny enough, doesn't seem to make its return. The cross, however, has seen a bit of a repurposing now, thrown in succession to create a ray of light to pierce the many creatures of the night. As you navigate your way to victory, be mindful there's no safety net in the event you bite the dust. Use more than 3 continues and you're leaving the arcade in defeat. Hopefully you didn't pump the machine full of coins when you started. You can also sacrifice your additional continues to increase your health bar, but I mean, to each their own, I guess. Funny thing we've discovered over time is that there are many different ROM sets for Haunted Castle, depending on the region with varying difficulty. The US ROM sets vary the most, typically regarded as the hardest overall as enemies and hazards deal significantly more damage to your already limited health bar, so if you decide to pick this up to play, be mindful, specific releases have varying revisions. The only physical home port I'm familiar with is the Japan exclusive release for the PS2 that has some pretty fun goods inside, including the original OST and some early historical data. Now, we open up this quarter muncher across the outskirts of town, venturing into the Transylvanian cemeteries. Zombies rise to the occasion, accompanied by some skeletal remains, trickling in for a thriller-themed haunt. Although we now marvel at the beautiful arcade aesthetic, Simon couldn't look more uncomfortable in combat. clenching with each step taken to avoid a fearsome number 2 as enemies appear as if they too smell something foul brewing. The entire stage feels submersive from the very start, as the foregrounds and backgrounds play a significant role in your mode of travel. This quickly becomes apparent as statues wither away, toppling down before you while the stage itself attempts to swallow you up, brick by brick. Seriously, this moment caught me off guard, triggering my PTSD from a prior engagement. Taking to the foregrounds, you jump from pedestal to pedestal, avoiding field fires that instantaneously break out, all while the forest itself patiently waits to gobble you up. As our stage draws to a close, we are greeted to our greatest test yet, Medusa in all her glory, ever so settling on the eyes as this might be her most wicked redesign yet. Luckily she won't put up that much of a fight. With a proper subweapon, you can unload, catching her off guard early on to get things rolling. As the fog rolls in, the path to Dracula's castle appears, staring back from across the courtyard. Making your way below, you'll discover riverbanks carved out deep inside the terrain, now tasking us across some of the most challenging platforming sections to date. If you aren't accustomed to Simon's stiff and awkward moveset, your game will most likely end here as the platforming and stage hazards become beyond offensive. Making your way to higher grounds will be done so through combat, revealing the way through each kill. The red skies foreshadow the forthcoming of Hell on Earth as Drax's troops ramp up in numbers and a giant bone dragon descends down atop the battlefield. If you didn't bring the stopwatch, good luck, as keeping your distance and hacking away with the Morningstar is as strategic as this song and dance can be. Sending his skeletal remains packing to the crypt lowers the drawbridge to Castle Dracula. The visuals when this released must have been a sight to see. The hunchbacks are large and quite menacing while ghosts flicker throughout the halls. The castle decor portrays the many ghostly residents, and the artist for this Picasso must have had a soft spot for Simon's quest. Simon will have an out-of-body experience midway through this venture as his soul crosses over to the spirit realm for a run-in with some dark angels. Be sure to grab a quick bite too if you can, and don't forget to search out the Master Sword per se, as it will be your key to victory by endgame. As you journey the far-off lengths of the castle, you arrive deep inside the castle catacombs, filled with mummified remains, itching to wrap things up here. This is where your swordplay becomes handy, as the mummified inmates are fairly nimble for corpse sake, requiring you to move quickly and efficiently. The underground bank will surely rise, so give it some time or you'll lose your footing overshooting your trajectory. The floating floors will show you the way, till you have a run-in with a giant stone golem whom towers over you. He's not painstakingly difficult, anticipating each projectile while maintaining distance until he decides to come into range for a scrapping. He will eventually get frustrated, moving in for a ground and pound, only for Simon to slash away relentlessly, securing the victory. Home sweet home. Nothing calls to a Belmont quite like the clock tower, a collective of the pain and suffering you have endured up until this point, thrown together and blended up only to get served cold. If it's not the crazy service elevator that will break your spirit, it's our favorite floating heads combined with an army of hunchbacks that bring the highest degree of confusion to any plan of attack. This stage's saving grace is that death took a sick day. Surprisingly, our boy Franklin appears towards the end, whom has seen better days, now frustratingly tied up, angry and confused from experimentation. Dodge the falling debris as he goes into a tirade and end this round quickly. You sort of feel bad for the poor guy. Maybe he wasn't so bad after all. Still here? Well, if so, that's a shocker. Dracula's chambers lie just ahead, beyond the bridge. Well, we've done this plenty of times before, so it shouldn't be too difficult, right? Wrong. The entire stage is a chase down along the crumbling bridge that is armed with bats, picking you apart bit by bit until there's nothing left for the buzzards. If you entertain them for even a moment, you won't make it across. Descending down into Drax's chambers means lights out for Batman. This battle is fairly straightforward as long as you have a few rations of health remaining. Trust me, you can do this. As he comes forth, stick and move, forcing him to flee into a flock of bats with each counterstrike. There's no dodging a crazy sequence of hellfire strikes here, just simple daggers. Stay in sync until he frustratingly reveals his final form. In a matter of moments, he transforms, and it's quickly apparent he's not the beast you were expecting. More so a floating head that is ready to curse you out. Crouch down and slash away till this big head deflates quicker than the ego he left at the door. As Simon reunites with his bride-to-be, he watches on patiently as Castle Dracula crumbles before him, submerging brick by brick as this tale becomes nothing more than another riddle of the Transylvanian Sea. Haunted Castle is a game enjoyed by the hardest of hardcore fans. You don't pick this series up and say, I think I want to play Haunted Castle. You end up here when you've been starved of a new Castlevania for quite some time. Even with the poor controls and extreme conditions, Konami's strong suit has always been their creative outlook and design. With as many setbacks as this project endured, these qualities still shine through. The levels can absolutely chug along with limited deviation off the straight and narrow path, yet there's sort of moments here and there that begin to feel like, well, Castlevania. The over-the-top sprite work keeps the little adventure thrilling throughout, pushing you past the many frustrating moments you will endure. It's one of those titles that you pick up and play, and years later, bring up in conversation with friends when talking about games that could use a remake. There's so much potential here too. If only Konami took the time and breathed some new life into it, perhaps this little gem could finally get the much needed redemption arc it's always deserved. When we return, it will indeed get just that as we finish up this two-parter with Haunted Castle Revisited. See you there, gang.